Hello and welcome back to the podcast, Resolutionary Leaders. Today we are speaking with Jen Pasquale, and she is coming to us from Washington, D.C. And I'll let you introduce yourself so I don't miss anything fabulous out.
Of course. Thanks for having me. So I am, of course, Jen Pasquale, based out of DC, and I am a small business owner in the space of team development, team building, leader coaching, particularly with a lens towards strengths development and helping organizations build strengths-based cultures. We've been in DC since 21. We are actually an active duty military family, so we've moved around a whole lot. I've got 2 teenagers and 2 cats and a husband for 18 years and all the things, but really excited to be here and talk to you today.
So I jump on the 2 teenagers, some conflict resolution, some dispute management in the house.
Yes, we have. So one just started freshman year, one just started junior year. And it's interesting. There's so much about it that I find really fun because the conversations we can have are so different, right? We can, particularly in kind of today and age, like they're informed about things that I probably didn't even know about or didn't care about at their age. And so there's all kinds of conversations about the world and politics and you name it, right? We can have conversations because they're mini adults. So it's actually a lot of fun. It's hard for sure and at times, but I enjoy them quite a bit.
Yeah, it's amazing the access to information and how when they're really young, you're the one that basically funnels the information. And suddenly they're telling you things. And you're like, how do you know about that? My son knows all about planes, but he's been researching them online and
Mhm.
all these things that I don't have a lot of interest in, but I'm working at being really interested in warplanes. Anyway, so let's go into discussing strengths-based training and leadership. I think one of the key pieces to all of the work in navigating dispute resolution and difficult workplaces is the team dynamic and creating an environment where people feel safe to be honest about what's going on for them and clarify situations, ask questions. So, speak to me a little bit about how people pull you in and the kinds of things that you do to help them develop those kinds of environments.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think we're in a space where being seen and being heard and feeling like there's room for you to have opinions and share those opinions and be able to have good discussion is the environment, the work environment that a lot of people are wanting. And so where I often get brought in, and it tends to vary, but in terms of my sweet spot, if you will, and the place that I really like is where there's been some kind of leadership change. So maybe there's someone new who's come in and they've got this team for the first time and they really want to get off on a foot that's informed. And so they want to do some strengths-based work so that they, as the leader, can start to understand who are the people at the table, what are the personalities and the motivations, and how do I really manage and lead these folks? But then also, how do they learn that about each other? So that's one space I like a lot. The other space is what I think most people might imagine, where you've got a team that maybe is a little dysfunctional and not functioning well, either in communication or in project delivery or whatever it might be. And so it's looking at how can understanding how each of us operate and then understanding that about each other help us do that work better and also figure out if are we asking the kind of the wrong people to do certain things, right? So when we look at strengths-based development, it's really about leaning into the best of what people bring and not necessarily having them focus on those things that are just naturally harder for them. We can't all be great at everything. And so sometimes it's helping teams figure out what are the kinds of projects, the kinds of actions, the kinds of roles certain people might really just thrive in. Maybe that's not the role they're in right now. So that's another way that those kind of strengths-based development can really serve a team.
So tell me what that looks like a bit. The strength space. It's a Gallup.
Yeah, so the tool, and there's several different strengths-based tools. The one that I learned a few years ago, and actually it was funny when I started doing strengths as a practitioner, I didn't remember that I had done it 20 years prior as a consultant in a big 5 consulting firm. And so it was really interesting to see how little of that had changed over my 20 years of work and professional life and becoming a mom and becoming a spouse and all the things. It was actually quite stable through all of that, which is I always think is interesting. But looking at what does it look like in a team and how does it really impact a team, a couple of the things that I consistently notice as I'm doing these workshops is I will notice someone who comes in who sees their strengths for the first time and they have this very almost like puzzled look. And there's a little bit of apprehension of, oh, okay, I lead with harmony, but the information says maybe I'm avoiding conflict. And so they latch on to this part of that harmony that they see is the downside to harmony. And so what I love about the work is getting to help them understand what the superpower of that particular talent is. So harmony, as an example, is the person on the team that really helps keep the temperature low, helps keep everybody calm, helps make sure we're focused on how do we move forward, but how do we make sure everyone is heard? So it can be this really huge powerhouse, but
Mm.
part of the effort is giving people the time and space to really grow into that ownership of, I know there's this part of harmony that can be maybe seen as negative, but there's all these other parts of it that are really powerful and can really help propel a team. And I'm going to start leaning into those. And so they come in a little bit more, shoulders a little bit lower, and they leave a little bit taller, because it's like, oh, this is what I bring that no one else does. And so I love seeing that confidence shift that often happens. The other thing I've seen is where, for instance, if a project sponsor brings me in because maybe there is some friction on a team, what is so fascinating is when they start doing the team building exercises, because a lot of this is not me just didactic, right? It's them up talking with each other, learning about each other. And it's so fun to see the light bulbs go off when people realize, oh, I didn't realize that part of you is why you ask questions the way you do, why there's certain aspects of the project that you really like to be involved in. I thought that was because you didn't trust me. Oh, it's not because you don't trust me. It's because that's really fun for you. And so you want to be part of it. And so making room for them to be part of it then changes the dynamic completely. And so that's always really fun to watch. Like the light bulbs go off. You can see them in the room where someone goes, oh, I totally mischaracterized you in my mind because I was just taking kind of the one-way information. I didn't have any language for why are you doing that? Like, why are you that way? Now that I understand this is just inherently who you are, I can support that. I just didn't know it. So those are the ones that are the most fun for me to observe when I'm doing a workshop, and they happen so often.
And I see the value of just creating an opportunity for people to really communicate about each other in a I don't want to say passive, in a non-confrontational.
Mhm.
It's you're not blaming them about you did this or you did that. It's more understanding, oh, I understand that behavior, and coming at it from a much more curious, um,
Yes.
kind space.
Mhm. Now, one of the pieces of that I think proves really valuable is within the Clifton Strengths, which is that's the name of the tool. You can run a couple different versions of the report. So there's like a top 5, or there's what's called the full 34. I love doing the full 34 with teams because what it gives them is some visibility on what is hard for their colleagues, because you're going to be rank ordered, right? So these are your 34 talents in the order in which kind of it's the easiest for you to step into them. You're capable of all of them, but some are going to be harder. And so a lot of times what colleagues will notice is, oh, okay, now I understand why if I'm asking you to ideate with me and come up with solutions, and ideation is 34 for you, that's neither fun or efficient or effective, or like you're not the person to help me with that. But the somebody on the team is really good at that. So who's the person I should be bringing in instead? And I should be partnering with them to ideate, because that's going to get us where we want to go faster. And so that's what teams find, is they end up being more efficient, more productive, because we start to figure out what are the things we need on the team, and are we leaning on the right people? But by having that awareness of what's at the bottom, it's good for me because I know, okay, I can give myself some grace for these things that I wasn't designed to be good at those things, right? For whatever circumstance, right? This is not my superpower, but somebody on this team has that superpower. So if I don't have it, who do I lean on to help bring that into the organization and into the team? And then how can I have a little bit more grace for my colleagues when I understand that about them too? So that's the other part that I think is really helpful with what you were talking about.
It's making me think of a conference I was at, and there was a woman speaking about there are four, you should spend all of your time in that strength, like really identifying what you are better than most people at. This is a thing that I do better than just about everybody. Then there's the things that I'm good at, and then there's the things that I'm okay at, and there's the things that I just suck at. And so there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And she was talking about you want to stay in 1 as much as you can and look at some of the behaviors, say in 2, that you can then move into 1. But a lot of us spend our time wasting our time in 3s, trying to get them to 2s, where it'd be better to be in the 2 to the 1.
Well, and I think there's history for this, right? Though, if we look at how organizations and how leaders led for decades, there's precedent for saying, I'm going to help people get better at the things they're not good at. That was a strategy for how you managed and led people for a very long time. And I think part of this work and what you're talking about is really saying, what happens if we just help people grow the things at the top?
Mm.
And what Gallup would say is you'll get exponentially better if you try to grow those things at the top. If you put that energy into things at the bottom, you're going to get marginally better, but you're not going to love it. You're not going to have fun with it. It's not going to be the thing that makes you want to show up to work every day. So if we look at how to feel, people feel like they really belong in an organization, it's when they get to do those things at the top as often as humanly possible within their work.
Yeah. I was having a thought and I just lost it.
Can I offer a quick stat,
Yeah.
one of my fave stats, which is that when you're looking at like the top 34 as an example, one of the stats I love to give out in a class is that the chance that someone else in the room or anywhere will have your same talents in the same order in the top 5 is 1 in 33 million.
Wow.
So the narrative is really about how do we lean into the uniqueness that we bring to the organization? Because sitting around a table of 20 people, nobody in that organization approaches the problem the same. And so having that variety of perspectives and opinions and thoughts and discussion, right? That is how we lean into the best of the 33 million. And so it's always one of my favorites because it gets that. And I think that's part of what helps people stand a little taller is it is really that idea that I bring something no one else does. How do I use that the best I can? How do I lean into that the most that I can? And how do I make sure my team knows what I need? One of my favorite exercises I often do is one around what do you bring with a particular talent, but then what do you need from your environment in order to be able to show up with that talent? So if I am an ideator, if nobody brings me problems to solve and I'm not a part of problem solving, I don't get to exercise that part of myself that I really like and I have fun with.
Yeah.
But so I need an environment that's going to help me ideate and I need to be part of those discussions. Someone else may not need that. And so that understanding what you need from the environment is that's how we feel like we belong, we're seen, we're heard, people understand us, and they value us for really specific ways because they have this language for what that looks like for us.
And that is the ultimate leadership today, is being able to create that environment. And when the work that I do, I go in and that's the opposite of that environment.
Mm-hmm.
Walking on eggshells, just zero psychological safety is the opposite of that. In an environment like that, you've got most of those people not bringing all of themselves to the table at all. And I think that is the challenge of today. We have pushed for diversity, but still have not succeeded with inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
I think still diverse perspectives at the table carry a much heavier burden, and it's a lot harder to show up at the table and just keep trying to show up at the table when you're really feeling like you're pushing through people not being able to hear you and not. So I love this. And then the next thing is when people come to you, how often, because I know for me, people reach out when the team's falling apart. Uh,
Sure.
and obviously, this is a great preemptive building. I love that idea of you've got someone new start taking over a team and really setting them all up to succeed. But when you get brought into a team that's struggling and there isn't that environment where there's curiosity into how
Mm-hmm.
other people function. Have you had many situations, and can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll be honest and say I've been pretty fortunate overall that I've had some teams where there might be 1 or 2 folks on the team that maybe the leader is concerned about. Maybe they're not performing the way they think they should or something to that effect. And so there's been these sort of onesie twosie situations where there's 1 or 2 people that the leader might be concerned about. In general, what's interesting is I will often find, at least so far, that sometimes the teams that are willing to invest
Mm.
in work like this and in deepening the connection are teams that already have a little bit of a base, right? They appreciate the value that connection creates and they want it to get better. And so maybe there's some handful of new people and now they want to do it again. And there's some more new people and now they want to do it again because they recognize that this is iterative. I always talk about it like yoga. You can't just show up and be amazing at understanding your strengths, leveraging them, having language for them. This is a practice like any other practice. And so helping them iterate on that as changes to the team happen, or if there's a big new objective or a big new project, using strengths as a lens for how we're going to strategically plan for that. Like sometimes that's also part of the work, for better or worse, right? I've been fortunate that I haven't had any teams that are in like dire situations, but I've definitely had some fractures that show up in the workshops that we tend to temper just naturally through the work.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I think that's really, it's good to hear. I think if you're shying away from doing this kind of work, then that should be a red flag that there's something that needs to be dealt with on the team to get them to a place where there is more inclusion and safety.
No, I think there is definitely a safety piece in it to be able to show up as yourself and really step into that. I think that that's what a lot of people really want in the work that they're doing that's taking. We think about how much time we're spending at work, right, over our lifetime. We should want to show up as our whole self in that environment and be able to have that be supported. But that takes intention, it takes curiosity, it takes leadership. And frankly, it takes budgets, right? It takes money to be able to invest in your people in this way, but it
Mm.
always pays dividends, always.
Yeah. And if someone's listening and they'd like to run this test on themselves to find out their strengths, can they do that? How do they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So through Gallup, so Gallup.com has all the resources that I use. So as a Gallup certified coach, I lean on them for the resources. So the Clifton strengths can be taken by anyone. And there's leader versions, there's manager versions, there's a sales report for folks who are in the sales space. So there's a lot of different kind of angles, if you will, to strengths based on the roles that you're in. I always encourage folks to start with the top 5 or the full 34 as their budget allows. They're $25 and $60. So it's not a huge investment, but it's not nothing. But yeah, if folks can do that on their own, and particularly if they are curious about it for their team, it might be a place to start because you'll see the 26-page report that you get and you'll start to understand, okay, how would it help me as a leader to know this about my team members? And then you can bring someone in to help facilitate that effort for you.
I'm just realizing I did this when I was at business school, so I'm going to do it again and see if I've still got all the same strengths after having 3 children and running my own business.
Yeah.
Uh, so now your website is leadwithcuriosity.com, is that correct?
.co.
.co.
Yeah.
Curiosity.co. Okay. What else would be interesting for you to share? Practical tips for people who find out, run this thing, realize what their strengths are, and then how do they go into the office and say, okay.
I think the big part of it is having an environment that the value of going through it as a team is now we all have a shared language. So it's hard to be the only person who has that information about yourself and about how that impacts without being able to share that with others, right? That's why it's so much more effective if we're doing it as a whole group and as a team. So I think that would be my advice, is to try to get them on. If you're on board and you find a lot of value in it, is explain to them, here's what this is saying about me. How does that land for you? How do you see me that way? One of the best ways to start to see your strengths show up is ask other people. It says I have this, here's what it means. How do you see me showing up in that way? Because it'll help give you some other ideas. But I guess my advice or tip back to your first question is really about the curiosity piece. In the work you do and in the work I do, we have to show up with curiosity as leaders. We have to be interested in things that we don't know anything about, things that we may have our own ideas about. We have to be willing to ask the questions and then leave the space for the answers. And I think sometimes there's so much put on leaders and managers that it doesn't feel like there's time for the pause. And if we really want to grow our teams, if we really want to create cohesion, if we really want to create retention, we've got to make room for the pause and for the curiosity. And I think right now that's hard. And acknowledging that is important, but then figuring out what are some small steps I can do to try to introduce curiosity and connection into my one-on-ones, into the environment that I'm building for the team, how we start a meeting. There's small things people can do all the time to help start to foster some of that mentality that will make it the really rich environment for projects like this.
Yeah, it's shifting from being a manager to being a leader. It is your role now, once you're the leader, the leadership within the management role is creating the space for everyone on your team to thrive and do the work. And I think that comes up a lot where
Mhm.
have people that have been promoted that are very good at what they do and they don't get out of the weeds enough. They don't let go. And I think, yeah, that there could be a whole training on just how to let go and lead.
And I'll offer one additional thing to that. I was at the Gallup Summit. Gallup does a workplace summit every year. So I went out to Omaha this year, and there was a session I attended that was literally on that topic. And it was fascinating and really, I don't know, like sad is the word that comes to mind, but I don't know of a better word, in just really understanding where our managers are right now, right? We have so many individual contributors that have been promoted and have moved into roles, but for a variety of reasons, the resources to really tool them to be in those roles haven't existed. And so they're having to figure it out, and they're doing the best that they can. But we know that it's falling short of helping people feel included and heard and valued. And that's in some ways, it's not necessarily on those managers, right? We set them loose without what they needed. And now it's how do we come back around and help tool them to have the skills to step into the leadership role that we want them to be in. Like they're not going to, maybe some people will get there on their own, and there's lots of people that do get there on their own, but there's just as many managers that are drowning right now because they don't have the support and the resources to really help them feel like they are also growing and they are also progressing so that they can help their folks do that as well.
That's such a great point. I think that so many people talk about their bad manager and how horrible their manager is, and realizing that most people aren't trying to be a bad manager, doing their best. And like you're saying, have not been told to actually really succeed in the role. So yeah, it's on leadership to value their people. It all comes down to the people. And yeah, I'm glad you're doing the work you're doing. It sounds fascinating.
So much fun.
And if you're an ideator,
For sure.
then
Yep.
thank you so much. And Jen's website is leadwithcuriosity.co. And I look forward to coming and seeing you in DC next time I'm there.
I look forward to it.
All right.
Thank
Bye.
you.